Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Holm, and welcome to the What About Grief podcast. When we talk about grief with a capital G, I realize I never gave it much thought until I experienced it myself firsthand when my wife Sarah passed away a few years ago. What, when, and how a person experiences grief is a pretty wide open category. Yes, human loss might be at the top of the list, but the truth is a person can grieve over a variety of situations too, like losing a home, being let go from a job, or retiring from a career. How about grieving a marriage that ended up in divorce, or getting ghosted by a friend? But since this podcast began, one type of grief comes up time and time again in conversations I've had with people, and that is the loss of a beloved pet. For so many of us, our pets are like the very best kind of family, always there, loving us unconditionally. So that is what we are going to focus on in this episode of What About Grief? The loss of a beloved pet and how it affects their humans as well as any other household animals. Do animals feel or show their grief? I don't know. But I've come across so many interesting stories in researching this topic that I'm really looking forward to today's guest, Steve Dale. I first heard of Steve Dale listening to his weekly show on WGN Radio here in Chicago titled Steve Dale's Pet World. Steve is a certified animal behavior specialist who has been a trusted voice in the world of pet health for over 20 years. As I mentioned, you have likely heard him on his nationally syndicated radio shows, maybe seen him on TV, read him in print and online, or seen him speak at events around the world. His contributions to advancing pet wellness have earned him many awards and recognition around the globe. So when it was time to cover the topic of grief and pets, I knew the man to reach out to. And I want to welcome him to the podcast. Hi, Steve.
Larry, it is great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, let's get into it. So first off, take us through why animals have been your career. What drew you to them?
I've always cared a great deal, and my dad loved animals. And at the time when I grew up, the choices were pretty much Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Yeah.
And maybe Jane Goodall doing a special sitting in the middle of Africa somewhere with her chimpanzees. But we'd always watch those together. And I had a great interest and eventually was a volunteer at the Lincoln Park Zoo. Whenever I worked, and I did work in radio, a variety of different, played music on the radio, produced radio, I always brought animals into it. And when you work in radio and you're 22, 23 years old, and you work at one point in the day part, the other part of the day part, if you want to pay rent, you still have to find something else to do. So I wrote. And I often wrote stories about companion animals or pets. I often wrote about entertainment as well. And I got targeted as an entertainment writer, which was fine with me. It was great. I got to go to the theater. I got to cover all these different celebrities when they came to town on what was at that time called a junket. So to promote a movie or a book, they'd come to Chicago. So there I was sitting with Sally Field or whoever it might be. And I followed Oprah wherever she was. Do I need to say Oprah Winfrey? I think people know.
Yeah, she's a one-word name.
Yeah, and wherever she was, I was for several years. But at some point in time, too long of a story to tell now, I decided to just follow the pet world. And one of the decisions that was made for me was the Chicago Tribune calling me, asking me to do, because if there was a story about animals in the Tribune on the feature side, I wrote it for years. So I was like the pet guy. So I was asked to do a syndicated column. And I knew at that point in time, just in my gut, that's all I would be doing. And I think twice about it because as a reporter, which is what I am trained as, you want to be able to do different things. You don't want to be, quote, typecast. And two different people, I thought of their advice that they gave me. One was about if you could do something better than anyone else and you love doing it, do it. And the other piece of advice was to follow your heart. And the first piece of advice given to me by Lucille Ball, and the second by Oprah Winfrey, actually. So I did follow my heart, and I took that column, and from there on, I've been writing about pets, and that's pretty much all I do, and I'm not complaining.
That's awesome. So I got to ask you, what was your first pet that you ever had?
I didn't grow up with pets, actually.
Okay.
The first pet that I had, or we have had with my wife, a dog named Chaser. And she actually changed my life, because if it wasn't for her, I'm not sure that I would be doing what I do now. So this dog was what you'd call a rescue dog today. It was before rescues were called rescues. So this dog brought into our home approximately 10-month-old Brittany. And the good news is I was able to get her to go outside. That is because, however, of the bad news. She was so afraid of everything outside, buses, cars, people, other dogs, that everything in her came out. So in that sense, she was kind of house trained. On the other hand, she was fearful of everything and had separation anxiety. And working through her issues, which took me about a year, really. I don't know that I'll ever have a bond as intense with another dog. I've had wonderful, great dogs since then, but she taught me a lot. And actually, when I got the Tribune offer, I thought, well, if other people can share that same bond and I can help them, then it'll be worthwhile, and it has been.
I feel like that is the key word in doing all the research and talking with people, the bond. Like, it's like no other with a pet.
Yeah. I'm on the board of the Human Animal Bond Association, actually, among other boards that I'm on. And we celebrate that bond, because without that bond, you wouldn't be here talking to me about this topic. I would not be leaving tomorrow for a veterinary meeting to speak at. We would not have pets. And in fact, in America right now, so here's what's happened. Before the pandemic, since the year 2000, watch my hand now, all of you, I'm sure you can see it, gradually the number of pets year after year after year in America, and I'm primarily talking dogs and cats, increased. Then the pandemic hit, and the shelters were desperate. They didn't know what was coming. And they said, and I quote, "Help!" all over the world. And people did. They stepped up and adopted or fostered or both all these animals. And suddenly the shelters happily were clear. Nothing like that had ever happened, though not for a good reason, but these animals found homes. So the number of animals skyrocketed in America. Now it's continuing to increase, but again, very gradually. There are more pets than children in America.
Wow.
And by the year, I believe it's 2030, we're going to have, if I remember my numbers correctly, don't ever have me do your accounting. I'm not a number guy. But 100 million pets in America.
Wow.
Yeah. So these pets have to be cared for. They need veterinary care and all the rest. But for the most part, we have this bond with them. I'm not going to get political. I promise.
Okay.
But neither political candidate has said this time around or ever, you must get a pet. People do it for a reason.
Right.
So here's a financial decision that's made, because pets do cost money. A time commitment that's made. Pets do take time. We must do it for a reason. And it's not only in America, it's in most places all over the world.
So why do we form that bond with our cat or dog or fish or whatever? Why do humans attach themselves to that furry animal?
I don't know. I mean, nobody knows for sure, except I can dance around the answer a little bit. With dogs, we evolved with dogs. We co-evolved with dogs. You know, it's quite amazing that it's been said that dogs have gone from our backyards into our homes, into our bedrooms, onto our beds. And to a degree, that is true in America. Having said that, sleeping with dogs is nothing new. Archaeologists who study this sort of thing have said that Cro-Magnon men and women shared their, whatever it was, their homes, whether it be a cave or whatever it might be, their huts, I'm not sure if that's the right word, with what was then not even a dog. They were evolving into dogs. That's how far back we go with our relationship with dogs. So
Yeah.
these wolf dogs, I don't know what else to call them, slept right next to us. We trusted them with our babies, and they trusted us with their puppies or cubs. It's quite incredible. We work together as hunters. No two species have done that, as far as anyone knows, in the history of the world that are both carnivores, competitive species. If you think about it, wolves, carnivores, competitive species to human beings, yet we worked with them for their benefit and ours. So what is the benefit today? There are all sorts of benefits. And I guess I can't answer that because we know, let me say that again, we know that pets are beneficial to our health. And I can rattle off, we get into a whole other podcast here, and I'll be sitting here for hours. But we know, without me going into details as to what those benefits are, there are many benefits. And what we now know, studies have finally been done, the dogs benefit too. And presumably cats benefit too. Goldfish, I don't know.
Yeah. Bad example, I guess.
No.
But unconditional love has to play a role in all of this, right?
I think that term is overused.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't believe there's any doubt that dogs love us, or cats. But if we abuse them, for a cat, all you have to do sometimes is, and that term abuse for a cat can mean you just screaming at the cat. And the cat's going to give you the middle digit. And that cat who you've lived with for a decade, say, isn't going to come into the room with you. They're not as forgiving. Dogs are incredibly forgiving, depending on the individual dog. And every dog has a breaking point. So I don't know if there's always unconditional love. And the truth is, I've also seen, as if there's a dating app for dogs or for cats, and people go to the animal shelter, and thank goodness they do, to adopt a dog. And sometimes it's not a great fit. And that dog is not necessarily going to provide your quote-unquote unconditional love. So I think it's conditional. I think that they're better at it than human beings, in truth.
Can pets sense how much we love them?
Yeah, I think so. And in fact, studies, if you want to get science-y, studies have looked at dogs' brains. And when people who they know walk into the room, there's a completely different response that lights up compared to people they don't know. But I guess that's from the dog's perspective. Absolutely, they know. And what they do is develop trust over time. Cats in particular. So cats are kind of control freaks who need to feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, they're not going to be comfortable with you. There are other reasons why cats may not feel comfortable, but those cats that love us, we have to work a little harder to earn love for cats than we do dogs, arguably, in general.
So let's get into kind of the grief part of it and deciding when it's time to put down our dog or our cat. What are the factors, I guess, that come into play for us on the human side?
What we're able to do with our pets, personally, I wish we could do for people. When there's no possibility of any benefit, there's no possibility of a treatment that'll work, and that person is suffering, I wish we could do for people, what we do for animals, which is end suffering. It is a final act of love, I believe, that we can demonstrate so they don't need to suffer. I mean, veterinary medicine is amazing for so many reasons. And today we have medications and such that can alleviate pain. But at some point in time, same as on the human side, can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And or without such a heavy dose of drugs, they have no idea where they are, what they're doing, or anything like that. And our pets generally don't have to go through that. Now, can the bond be too intense so people don't take that step? And the answer is yes.
When we're making that decision, can dogs and cats sense that something is up?
I just saw on TikTok, so, it's got to be true, that this person on TikTok said, who's a telepathic or whatever, I think that's what she calls herself, that our pets know that they're and can help us make the decision that they are going to be euthanized tomorrow at 3:30 or something. No, they don't. I uh, I think that I know that it's a very, very hard decision for people to make, and I understand that completely. I mean, I've been there. Anyone who's had pets over the years has been there. The sad part, or maybe it's wonderful, that for the most part, we outlive them. Because if it were the other way around, maybe it would be very unfair. However, it's not an easy choice to make. Do the pets know that we're about to make that choice? No. Do they have any control over it? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they know that they're not feeling well, and they maybe become anxious as a result of that because no one can explain what's going on to the animal, which makes it even more difficult. And then the animal's anxiety increases, which often increases ours, because pets pick up on our emotions exceedingly well. You come home from this podcast, and if you had a dog, and if you're all stressed out, because Lord knows anyone who talks to me for an hour is going to be stressed out. So you come home and you're all stressed out, or traffic's really bad,
Yep.
or you opened your mail as you walk into the house, and boy, that bill from the cable company is 3 times as large, and you don't know why. Your dog knows it. Your dog doesn't know the traffic was bad or that you talked to me or the bill was high, but your dog does know that for whatever reason, you are feeling anxious.
So I guess kind of just following up so I understand, like if I get my suitcase out, my dog knows that I might be going away,
Sure.
right? And
Sure.
she's going to Aunt Ethel's house for a week or something, right? So
Aunt Ethel and Uncle Fred, I like that.
There you go. But if a dog or a cat is really sick and we're spending more time hugging them and petting them and showing them more love, they don't understand that maybe something is coming up, or we're giving them so much more attention.
How would they know? How would they know what that appointment is at 3:00?
Right.
They know that you're feeling something.
Right.
That maybe you're feeling
Different.
sad,
Right.
and different for sure.
Different, I guess.
But they can pick up on the fact that we're feeling sad,
Yeah.
but they have no way to know why. And then the next question would be then, should you not feel sad so your pet doesn't feel sad? No,
Yeah.
because you can't. We're human, and we can't help that. If we have that kind of bond that we happily have with our pets, the sadness is profound, and sometimes more so than losing a human family member.
You're listening to the What About Grief podcast. We will get back to the conversation in a moment, but I wanted to remind you that you can write to us at the show with your thoughts, ideas, or a description of your own grief journey. We appreciate hearing from you, and we like being connected with our listeners. So please reach out to us via email at whataboutgriefpod@gmail.com. Also, if you like the podcast and find it helpful, please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. Hit the subscribe button and leave a review. All of this helps us grow the podcast and helps new listeners find the show. And share the link with those you know who are experiencing their own grief. The goal of the podcast is to help those like us navigate the confusing emotion that is grief. I've read a lot of people now have their veterinarian come and administer
they're literally put to sleep.
Put to sleep.
Yeah. And you know what? You mean come to the home.
Yeah, come to the home.
There's an organization called Lap of Love that began some number of years ago. Dr. Mary Gardner and Dr. Andy McVetti founded this organization, and it's wonderful. I would recommend that.
I was going to ask you, what's the benefit? Is it to not make the animal go through getting in a car and going to a location versus just, putting them to sleep in a comfortable, familiar place?
So many benefits. That's
Yeah.
one of them.
Yeah.
So many pets, unfortunately, still get anxious going to the veterinarian,
Mhm.
cats in particular, but dogs too very often. And they're not feeling well, obviously, if we're talking about end of life. And it can be very physically difficult for you to get a big dog into
Right.
the car and then into the clinic. Uh, right there, and by the way, there is no need anymore for cats or dogs to feel anxious going to the veterinarian. Fear Free is an initiative in veterinary medicine that minimizes fear, anxiety, and stress of veterinary visits. Dr. Marty Becker began that, and I will tell you, it is the most revolutionary thing in veterinary medicine. It's amazing because we now know today the pets don't need to feel. For cats especially, dogs, some dogs too, for sure, and other animals too, they literally are so afraid they feel they're going to die. So if they are that fearful, terrified, that they feel they are going to die, that's pretty terrified, right? Uh, and we're talking about the end of life when we want to make things as easy as possible. There is another reason for those animals to have it done at home where they're comfortable. Uh, in addition to that, you may be more comfortable having it done at home. The other thing that I like about and not only Lap of Love, there are individual veterinarian, house call veterinarians that do this that aren't a part of Lap of Love. Um, but Lap of Love veterinarians are so well trained, and this is all they do. So it's like if you have, I don't know, an appendix surgery. I don't think they're a specialist in appendix, but if you have a surgeon who has done 50,000 of these, wouldn't you prefer that to did I say veterinarian? I meant the doctor. Wouldn't you prefer that to a physician that has only done 3? So it's the same thing. This is all they do. And the compassion is over the top. They understand. They're not they're not going to hang around for 12 hours, but they're not watching the clock necessarily. I mean, everything is done exactly as it should be, which is why I like that option. Some veterinarians, maybe your own veterinarian, will make a house call. Some veterinarians do that. We've had that done before. That could be difficult for the veterinarian. So imagine knowing that person for many years and knowing that puppy or kitten from the time it was a puppy or kitten and now is a geriatric animal. Imagine the emotion. People don't think about this, that veterinarian has to over and over, whether it's in their own practice or at someone's home for veterinarians that will do that. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, your doctor doesn't have to deal with that.
No.
Veterinarians do on a daily basis, and technicians. They are the backbone of veterinary medicine anyway. And here you have veterinary technicians they're the ones talking to the kids to explain what's going on here. They're the ones talking to the adults to explain what's going on. And then the veterinarian often comes into the room, but it's the technicians that provide pre-support, here's something to read, or after support, here's a coloring book for the kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Our dog, our cat passes away. It might have been a close member of our family. It might have been someone's best friend. How do we, as humans, grieve the loss of our pet?
I'm not an expert on pet loss or grief, but all the experts do tell me express yourself. And that is the same whether we're talking about young kids or whether we're talking adults. Everyone expresses themselves differently. The thing you didn't ask me that you might next is how much time does it all take?
Right.
That's individual. Expressing yourself. How do you do that? Well, for little kids even, they do it differently. Some will draw pictures of the pet in a book that they create. Others will want to talk it out. It's the same with people.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you lose a pet, I call you and gee whiz, you won't let me off the phone. You want to talk about it? No, you want to talk about it more. No, that's not enough. You need to talk about it more. Other people don't want to talk about it at all, but would rather express themselves differently. If they don't talk about it and don't express themselves in any way, I'm told that's unhealthy. But expressing yourself, giving an opportunity to do that, and time to grieve. And happily, some workplaces now allow that.
Really?
At least for you to have a day off, maybe not 2 weeks off,
Right.
but a day off or so to have the pet euthanized, and then maybe the next day to, but if not, PTO, people need the time. How much time, as I said, all individual. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah. It's very similar to losing a loved one.
You are.
Yeah. I mean,
but you are.
Yeah. No, I'm saying as a
Yeah,
human
I
loved one.
understand.
I mean, I get ambushed by grief all the time. Seeing a couple out to dinner, wishing, I had that. Someone who lost their pet, you're walking in downtown Chicago and you see someone walking their dog.
Sure.
Bam, you're going to get ambushed.
Yeah, you're right.
So to your point, people put up photos. They might put the ashes up in an urn on the fireplace.
We've got 7, 9 of them. I'd have to count.
Yeah.
But we do in boxes. I'm not sure that means anything necessarily, but you remember each and every one.
Mm-hmm. Different personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about a pet is that you can go out tomorrow or next year. Once I was doing a show like you're doing. I was talking about pet loss and taking phone calls. This was on WGN when I was on, 7 to 9 at night. And get a call from a trucker I knew this because he said, "I'm in my truck." And you could hear that he was in his truck.
Yeah.
And then I did the radio thing. I had him blow that horn. It's always good radio,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he went, or however the horn sounds. I can't do that. So he did that. And I said, "How can I help you?" And he said, "I understand what you're saying. And I picture this guy as I have no idea, but 6'53", a big guy who could have played lineman for the Bears. and he's talking in a big voice. I lost this pet. It was a cat." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," thinking that this was, and he was beginning to get emotional, thinking that this was just days ago maybe, or hours ago. I said, "Well, how long has it been?" "It's been, let me think now, 12 years, 3 months, and 21 days. There's no right or wrong. And he had not gotten another pet yet.
Yeah.
And he was asking me, he felt, okay, now is the time. Should I feel guilty? No.
Right.
No. In fact, if you're adopting, you may be saving a life. So you should not feel guilty.
So the flip side, when an owner passes away, does the house pet, what kind of feelings and emotions and grief might they go through? Can we tell?
At one point in time, behaviors such as myself would say, "Oh, there's just been a change in the household, and that's all the pets are experiencing. And that's why you're seeing the changes in behavior." Yeah, but it's much more than that. They know you're not there. And if they saw it happen, or were there when it happened, I believe know why. I mean, when we are able to end the life of one of our pets, I want all of our pets to be there. What they're understanding for sure, I will never know. But I think they understand something. And that's been demonstrated to me just personally. I've seen that. And the part that we leave out here that I don't want to leave out are pet birds, parrots in particular. One story that I remember, and I've got so many pet parrot stories, is that this couple comes home and the bird keeps saying, "Sad, so sad, so sad, so sad, so sad," over and over and over. And the television was on. Shows you how much pet parrots understand. That was the night Princess Diana was killed. And that's what this parrot was, quote, parroting. But parrots know. Our dogs and cats know. They know much more than we give them credit for. But exactly what they know, I'm not sure. Do they mourn the loss of a household member or another pet in the house? Absolutely.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you've got 2 or 3 dogs and one passes away, how do the other 2 react? Yeah.
Depends on how friendly the dogs were with one another.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a roommate you really didn't like, maybe you're going to go out and celebrate. I don't know. And it's the same with our pets.
Yeah.
So oftentimes we don't see, and people mourn differently. And because the pet isn't eating, because the pet is playing still, because the pet you've not seen any behavior changes, I don't know if that means that the pet hasn't mourned at all. We don't know. We can't ask them. But sometimes it's clear.
Yeah.
You lose a person in the household or you lose another pet in the household, and that other pet or some of those other pets, they're not eating, they're not playing, they're acting mopey, and it's because they are mourning.
And I got to believe the bond between a service animal and a human is just next level, especially if one of them passes away.
Yes, absolutely true. Anytime that you spend that kind of time, you're dependent in part on that animal, your partners really.
Yeah.
In a way that, so as strong and as intense as my bond has been with many of our pets, including that dog I mentioned to you, nothing like me comprehending what it's like for a guide dog or any sort of service animal that's providing day to day to day support for a person, whether it be an invisible disability like PTSD, or whether it be I need that support because I can't get things off the shelf myself. It doesn't much matter. Those dogs are so profoundly missed. I'm not sure I have a word for it.
And on the human grief side, a friend just told me recently that Wednesdays can be tough for him because that was the day that they put their dog down. And I've read that some people cry and grieve more over the loss of a pet than a fellow human or a family member or a friend. I mean, that, again, the bond between these animals and us.
Well, sometimes people share secrets with their pets that nobody else knows. And you know what? The pets never divulge those secrets. Sometimes people spend more time with their animals. So think about it. If it's a stay-at-home mom or dad, you're there. The pet is with you the entire time. Your partner is at work for maybe 8 or 10 hours. So oftentimes, that is who we spend our time with. For children, that is who they share so much with that we don't even completely comprehend. The relationship can be magic between Lassie and Timmy, right? Well, that can be real life. I'm not sure that most kids fall into a well, but nevertheless, it can be real life, that intense bond that kids have with dogs. And if it suddenly goes away and the kids are too young to understand exactly what happens, that's incredibly powerfully difficult.
Yeah. And let's just touch upon, too, animals in the wild, the elephants, the whales, et cetera. I've noticed that they grieve, like elephants will surround the dead elephant.
Sometimes, yeah.
And wave their tusks over them and smell them. And yeah. Talk about the bond that animals in the wild have in the death of a loved one.
Right. Social animals with understanding seem to understand that something happened. I mentioned the Jane Goodall specials. Gosh, I can't think of the chimpanzee's name, but one chimpanzee literally would not eat when, it's on the tip of my tongue, the name of that chimp, but would not eat because the mom was killed. And is that because that chimp was old enough to find food? Other chimps would have helped, but that chimp was profoundly grieving. There are examples of animals that partner for life, like swans that you wouldn't expect, that in fact have great difficulty when the other one passes away for whatever reason. Yes, elephants and other social animals, but dogs and cats are social animals, and we're a part of whatever you call it. Pack isn't quite the right word at all, but whatever you call that social group that we're in with our pets. So no wonder.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I think it's also, too, just to kind of wind this up, it's important, you talk about grief and there's no time limit on it. I experienced when my wife passed away, grief, I'm learning to live with it and move forward with it. There's no timetable to it. And I think examples of losing a job or losing a pet or whatever you're grieving, to your point, we shouldn't be embarrassed about it. And you should have that forum to speak about why you're grieving over your pet. And to the trucker's point, it's been 13 years and he's still feeling that pain. Don't be embarrassed about it and get it out and speak to others.
Yeah, anyone who says it's only a dog or a kid. Do you have a baseball bat here? Because I'd like to use it to hit over their head.
I'm worried.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who says it's only,
Right.
fill in the blank. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Because you feel how you feel.
Yeah.
And today, hopefully we understand that's okay. But many people don't understand that and don't much care about it. And that's unfortunate because it's their loss. And if they say, well, it's only a dog, or first off, I know they never had a dog.
Yeah.
And secondly, it is their loss because I had this special relationship with a special being that is difficult to even articulate. Same with cats, same with pet birds, the same with a lot of the companion animals. If that pet, I don't know, guinea pig means that much to you, I understand. We can have bonds with all sorts of companion animals. Of course, dogs and cats are at the top of the list, partially because they're with us longer than some of the others, though not pet parrots. But it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's more than that. They become a part of us. And what I hope people do is try to celebrate that bond that you had with that animal. At least you had it. And that is worth celebrating. Remembering how the cat would come up to you at 3 a.m, wake you up purring in your ear. Or remembering how the dog would come to you as you are on the phone trying to do a business call with a squeaky toy going squeak, 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 and the person on the other end says, "What is that?" Or the time when you came home from work feeling lousy, or the time that you lost a family member, and what helped get you through that was your dog or your cat. They're amazing.
I think that's a beautiful way to put a period to this podcast.
Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Steve, for your wisdom on this topic.
Thank you.
One of the underlying themes we encounter on repeat here on this podcast is there is no grief without love. A great example of that is from this past winter when Jon Stewart of The Daily Show spoke about the loss of his family's beloved 3-legged dog, Dipper. In talking about Dipper and how much he meant to the family, Jon broke down and wept on television. He also expressed a hope for the audience that they too would find the love of an amazing pet. Choking back his tears as he said, "My wish for you is one day you find that dog, that one dog that is just the best." His tribute to Dipper on the show also inspired wonderful acts of kindness. 1 week later, the dog shelter where Jon Stewart's family adopted Dipper reported receiving over $35,000 in donations in Dipper's honor. I highly recommend that you Google this 3.5-minute video, and you will immediately understand the relationship, bond, and love between a pet and its owner. My thanks to Steve Dale. What About Grief is available monthly on all major podcast listening platforms. Please follow the podcast as well as rate and review the show on Apple Podcast. The executive producer of What About Grief is Marcia Anderson. Logo artwork was designed by TED Studios. This episode was recorded at BAM Studios in Chicago. And lastly, feel free to email us at whataboutgriefpod@gmail.com.